Welcome to Memory Lane Gaming's new series, First Impressions. I am your host, The Tanuki. In this series, I will give, as the title says, my first impressions on games. Think of it as a review, but not for the whole game, just basically the beginning of it. Anyway, for this episode, I am doing a PC puzzle shoot-'em-up game called Galacide. While frequenting some forums, I stumbled upon one of the developers of this game asking for people to play and review his game. I glanced at a few of the pictures he had posted and thought it looked like the game R-Type. I noticed that in those pictures the background was very detailed, which caused me to wonder if it might be too detailed and might distract away from the attention in the foreground. For the most part, that is not the case. At least, not in the first few levels of the game. But I don't think that my initial worries were completely off base, because there is a problem with the graphics of the game. For the most part, it looks great. But the power-ups and the item drops, which are also known as scraps, and the enemies all tend to kind of blend together once the action actually picks up. While I think that Galacide does a good job of doing what it wants to do, which is a puzzle shoot-'em-up, I found myself questioning if it was even really necessary. I applaud the developers, which are called Puny Human, for trying something unique. But in doing so, they have created a game that I feel caters to a very niche market. People that only like puzzle games probably won't be interested in Galacide. And those that like shoot-'em-ups may not even be that interested in Galacide, unless they also like puzzle games. And if someone had tried to tell me that this game blended the puzzles and the shoot-'em-up together, I wouldn't have thought that I would enjoy it at all. I did enjoy it, though. Probably not quite as much as the developers were hoping, but I did enjoy it. However, I don't think that this is a genre that is likely to be, taking off anytime soon. I think that the controls are pretty good. My ship seemed to move in a fluid way, and I never really seemed to overshoot or undershoot my desired destination. It always basically went where I wanted it to, exactly when I wanted it to. Which is fantastic. I played with the keyboard, but you're also able to play with a gamepad if you wish. I did play with the gamepad a little bit, but I mostly played with the keyboard just because that was what was handy at the time. The music, however, is excellent. It's not overly intense, but it's not too mellow either. I felt it did a great job of capturing the feeling of the environment depicted on the screen. And speaking of which, the visuals are pretty great as well, with some fantastic backgrounds. And it's not too difficult to do battle with your foes with the detailed backgrounds. Not as much as I thought it would be. As long as I can actually notice that there are enemies heading my direction. Which brings myself to my next point. I found myself focusing so much on clearing the bit wall, which is the puzzle aspect of Galacide, that I oftentimes ignored the enemies. When you destroy enemies, they drop scrap, which you can then shoot at the bit wall the same way that you would shoot at an enemy. It's the exact same button and everything. Except the scrap would go through enemies. Once it hits the bit wall, it will transform into a bit block. Which it would be the same color as the pickup that you picked up. So either like orange or purple or green or whatever. If you manage to connect at least four bit blocks together at the same time, then you would be able to clear that bit wall. That color of bit in the bit wall. And that's basically how you progress. The screen is always scrolling, so you have to fight the enemies and destroy the enemies to get them to drop scrap, so you can shoot it at the bit wall, so you can basically clear the bit wall, sort of like many other matching type puzzle games, like the Puyo Puyo games, which you may know as like Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine, or I believe Kirby's Avalanche was also a Puyo Puyo game. And it's similar to that, except you're not, the blocks aren't falling from the sky, you're shooting them to the side. But the problem with this was I was getting so focused on trying to clear the bit walls that oftentimes I tunnel visioned so hard that I didn't even notice that there were enemies coming at me. I mean, I knew that there were enemies coming at me, but I didn't pay any attention to them. And for the most part, you don't really have to pay attention to the enemies, at least in the early levels. But if you're just blindly shooting when you don't have scrap to add to your bit wall, if you're just blindly shooting and hoping to destroy the enemies, occasionally that could get you into a bit of a pickle. And you may not be destroying the enemies as quickly as you need scrap. And most of my deaths came because of that. Because I was so focused on trying to clear the bit wall that I let several enemies fly right past me, and I didn't have the scrap needed to clear the bit wall. The enemies come from the right side of the screen, and they fly over the bit wall, which means that it's entirely possible that you may not even really realize that they're there because of the color of the bit wall. It's probably more my fault than the game's fault that I tunnel visioned so hard, because I do kind of have a bit of an OCD with puzzle games, in that I want to clear everything. But in Bitwall, while you should try to clear as much as you can, you also just need to focus on clearing a path. Sometimes. At the end of some of the levels is a boss fight. The first level had more of a gauntlet of enemies, which I rather enjoyed. It was nice being able to play this game as a shoot-'em-up without having to worry about the puzzle aspect for a little while. The second level had an actual boss fight, and I will applaud Puny Human for making this boss challenging without making it cheap. It was still early in the game, so it wasn't extremely challenging, but it did require strategy and skill to defeat it. once again, these boss fights don't have any bit wall to detract away from them, which I am very thankful for. In the end, while I think the tutorial did a great job of teaching me how to play, it was still quite confusing based on the nature of the game. I had to go through the tutorial twice before I actually understood what I was doing. So you may have a little bit of trouble initially getting started in the game. That is, if you don't know what you're doing at all in the first place. And I didn't realize that this was a puzzle game when I started playing it. So that's probably why I was so confused at the beginning. However, despite everything, I would recommend giving Galacide a shot if you get the opportunity. What it does fairly well. But it's still not necessarily this amazing game. And it does have its fair share of problems, which may or may not be more personal for me. You may play it and you may find it not to be distracting. You may find that you don't tunnel vision. But I very much did. And I played it quite a bit, actually. I didn't get very far. I was mostly just playing the same first couple levels, trying to fully understand the game. The beginning of the game, rather. But I do think Galacide is worth playing. If you like puzzle games and shoot 'em ups. And that's only if you enjoy both of them. If you only enjoy one of them, you're going to be disappointed. Anyway, thank you for listening to my first impressions on the PC puzzle shoot 'em up game called Galacide. I would like to thank the developers at Puny Human for giving me the chance to play it and for giving me the chance to review it. They were very nice to me. And I will be looking forward to more games from them in the future. Thank you for joining me.